Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à la conférence de presse que le Conseil fédéral.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this press conference from Ignacio Cassis.
French and German, so please, for those that understand French and German, there is headset. Voilà, une petite remarque, une conférence de presse aura lieu aussi à la fin de la...
And there will also be a press conference at the end of the meeting, held by Mr. Yermak, head of Mr. Zelensky's presidential team, and any questions connected with the continuation of the conference, please keep your questions for later.
Voilà, merci Monsieur Bidot, merci geschätzte Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen an diese Pressekonferenz.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this press conference. Almost at the end of this National Advisors meeting, National Security Advisors meeting. The discussion is still ongoing, and the discussion at the end of the 10-point formula is going on with the contributions from the different countries.
So these nations have got together in Davos to discuss peace and the means to achieve peace. Peace in Ukraine, but also peace in other conflicts around the planet. You will understand why I'm talking about this now. Peace is something that the Ukrainian people urgently needs, and I would like to salute the Ukrainian ambassador who's in this room after more than 2 years of war. Winter on the Ukrainian front is not winter in Davos. We must do everything we can to help Ukraine put an end to this war.
Switzerland organizes this meeting together with Ukraine to continue the peace efforts. The conference is based on the long tradition of Switzerland for the promotion of peace. In the summer of 2022, in Lugano, the principles for the reconstruction of Ukraine were discussed, and here again in Davos. The 10 points peace formula of President Zelensky is the basis for such a peace discussion. We had 3 technical meetings that have taken place already in Jeddah, Copenhagen, and in Malta. Therefore, this is the 4th National Security Advisor meeting, probably the last one at this level. Today, the results of these talks will be presented. I presented the results of the last point 10 before I came to you, and this was elaborated by the working groups. Switzerland is in the working group about food security, nuclear security, and the confirmation of the end of the war. The conference in Davos is concentrated on the points 6 to 10 of the peace formula. That is, criteria in order to end the hostilities, the withdrawal of the Russian troops, justice for the committed crimes, protection of the environment, and the prevention of further escalation. And also the question of food security and humanitarian aspects will be discussed this afternoon. Tonight, there will be the co-president, the head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak, who will present the results between 6 and 7 tonight. Switzerland, in order to come back to our country, is able to provide humanitarian help for approximately 400 million Swiss francs. It is 1.6 billion euro will be foreseen until 2026 for our support. Our commitment for Ukraine will continue also during the forum here in Davos, together with the presidency of Switzerland and the Ukrainian authorities will organize a panel about the humanitarian demining, which we moderate, which is one of the Swiss priorities. You will certainly remember that the Swiss Council has just approved a package of 400 million francs, which was confirmed by the Parliament. I would like to thank the Forum and Mr. Schwab, the President, who is here. It is an honor for us. And despite all the preparations for the WEF meeting, and you are here and permitted this important meeting, we'd like to thank you for it. I would like to mention, and you may have heard it already, that tonight, at the end of the day, you will have a summary of all 4 sessions by Andrej Jarmak. That is the co-leader of the conference. This, as much as the introduction is concerned, and I'm available for your questions in German, French, or English.
Donnez le média pour lequel vous travaillez et votre nom.
Please state the media you start for and your name. You work for and your name. Laurent Siro for Keystone ATS. Mr. Federal Councillor, a few months ago you seemed much more prudent and about this peace formula. Since then, Switzerland has decided to take part. What makes you say that this plan is now better than it was a few months ago? And one of the results the Ukrainian would like to obtain is a world peace summit. Is Switzerland keen to host this such a summit if the Ukrainians so want? Switzerland has always saluted the 10-point plan, and if you consider that prudence is a sign that having a plan by one of the 2 nations who are at war, you are indeed right. In some way or another, we will need to find a path to include Russia in the process. There will be no peace without Russia having its word to say. But this does not mean, quite the contrary, that we should just be depressed and sit there and wait for Russia to do something. What can we do apart from wait? Because every time we wait, every minute we wait, dozens of civilians in Ukraine are killed or wounded. We have no right to wait forever. And this discussion, the purpose of this discussion, is essentially twofold, as I understood this morning, as I was physically in attendance. The first is that we must prepare a broad alliance of nations of the world, which is why we had 4 sessions, which we broadened as we went, to create international pressure for a peace plan. Ukraine's proposal is one proposal. It forms a foundation. It is a starting point. But, and that is what was expressed very strongly this morning, one must also ask the question, this international community comes together not just because of the war in Ukraine, but the war that they may have much closer to home. I don't like the word, but it's a kind of how do we find best practices? How can one exit armed conflict or war? What are the mechanisms? And how can one prevent escalation? These are 2 elements which are extremely interesting for countries beyond the specific example of the war in Ukraine. Laurent Burkharter, RTS TV. Can we really be realistic about the chances of success of the process? What has actually been done to extend beyond the classic Western allies, and how have you included the Global South and China? Success can be measured in terms of the goals you are pursuing. If the goal you're pursuing is to create an international alliance that goes beyond Europe or beyond the West with Canada and the US and that extends to the global South. Well, that aim has in part been reached with 83 nations. China is not included. It would be an important participation, but we have Brazil, India, Saudi Arabia, representatives of the BRICS, who are still in a dialogue with Russia. So that aim, I believe, has been achieved. There must be a common understanding of the points. We need to express that in different languages to be sure that we all mean the same thing, and that is no easy task. So this very broad participation is in itself a success. Second success, national security advisors is really the right level for this, the appropriate level, because we can go down not so much into the finer details, but into the technical aspects of these problems. And in that sense, these goals have been reached. If at the end of this process, a peace process can be initiated with Russia, no, not necessarily, but that was not the purpose. But the purpose is to prepare so that we are ready and ripe to launch a process with Russia when the time comes.
Gibt es denn bisher einen konkreten Erfolg dieser NSA?
Is there one concrete success of the NSC meetings? Where were you successful with this format which you just described? May I ask you back, what is a concrete success for you? Well, if you have done something to implement the 10 points, yes, this does exist. You can look at the process, and as I said, there are 83 countries that participate in it, having developed a common language to speak about these 10 points. For some, it is easier. For others, we need to discuss much more, and not only about coming to the process, but also coming to results. These are preparatory steps, and you should neither be depressed nor too enthusiastic, but it is necessary, because the alternative to what is happening today in Davos, the alternative is that each group decides for itself, the G7, the G20, the EU, and all the others. But here we try to speak together. And ladies and gentlemen, you should not underestimate the importance of saying the same thing. If we manage to do this with 83 countries and to have a collective movement at the international level, and also the United Nations are represented here, and this is very important because it could be able to do something which unfortunately was not able up to now in the United Nations, which is already a success. For me, if we say the success is to stop the war, then we are not yet that far.
Thank you very much, sir. Question in English from Steve Sedgwick of CNBC. In realpolitik, a lot has changed since this process started, since the first NSA meeting as well. The counteroffensive has, for all intents and purposes, stalled. There are questions about Western financial support from the United States and indeed from parts of Europe as well. Why hasn't there been an evolution of the aspirations of the 10 points, i.e. when you're in a strong position, you have a certain set of requirements. Now things are, quite frankly, a stalemate on the battlefield. Surely there should be an evolution of the aspirations. And secondly, I want to know what's being done to bring Russia into negotiations. My understanding is that the Ukrainians won't speak to the Russians at the moment directly. Surely that has to happen, sir. Thank you.
C'est des questions tout à fait justifiées, messieurs. La première question.
I think your questions are fully justified. The first question is, how do we evaluate what is happening on the battlefield? And as far as this situation is concerned, we have different views. The position of Ukraine is not the position of Russia. The two countries have both a vision that they consider to be the best. Obviously, the situation on the battlefield is going to influence when there will be a form of willingness on behalf of Russia to join and sit at the table of negotiations. That's obvious, but we have to be ready. We have to be ready, and we shouldn't wait until that moment to decide what to talk about. And this is why we're preparing now. We're preparing that moment. But in the meantime, the military, the battlefield situation is creating, or not, the right context to move forward.
Oui, alors la participation de la Russie.
That's right, the participation of Russia. I think this is pretty much what I just said. Currently, I think it is an illusion to imagine that by inviting Russia will accept. And that is not the purpose as we are speaking. Once again, right now, we are preparing to, at one point, get the Russians to join and participate. It will have to be facilitated, mediated by other states, potentially, in order to get Russia on board.
There is no alternative.
Merci. Une question, Monsieur Paggi.
Merci, Davide Paggi, Radio Télévision Suisse de langue italienne.
Hello, David Paggi. The Swiss Italian language media, don't you think this position is going to irritate Russia? Don't you think that this position could have an impact on the neutrality of Switzerland? Well, the first steps, the first 4 meetings, Nsa meetings, were not about pleasing Russia. It was about creating a common understanding on a set of 10 points and see whether we could find an agreement. By tweaking the points, possibly, if we could come to some sort of an agreement, a foundation, if you'd like, that we could submit to Russia. Right now, things are a bit more complicated. We're not going to have a peace conference without Russia. This is not possible. However, once again, we need to see how and when we can get Russia on board. One of the questions was about the next conference, and we're looking at this. We're taking this into consideration. We have not made any decisions, as you know. The Ukrainian president will be attending the World Economic Forum, and this will hopefully open opportunities for further discussions with him.
Stefan Bühler, CH Media. Der Krieg dauert an, dieser Prozess wird jetzt abgeschlossen.
Stefan Bühler, CH Media. So the process is going on, and how is it going to continue here in Davos and in the next weeks and months? In the next days, Ukraine will see, okay, what are the results of these 4 first conferences at the level of national security advisors, and these results will now be the basis to have a next step, maybe at a higher level, and how and when, well, and to what effect I can not tell you today, because this will be part of the discussions that we will lead with Ukraine.
Madeleine Vanelton, Le Temps, is Switzerland taking any other initiatives in this conflict as a mediator? And could you describe and qualify the role Switzerland could play to Could you describe the role of Switzerland in this conflict? Well, I think this is probably the most high-level and visible initiative that exists. I would like to give recognition to the Ukraine. There was a lot of reluctance initially, and yet there is a momentum. There is a collective movement forward. And it shows that there is this power to convince. Switzerland is, of course, active in many other areas of cooperation with Ukraine, demining, humanitarian initiatives, and a number of other initiatives involving the International Red Cross, for example. But this is more on a project-by-project basis. I really think that the NSA initiative is probably the most structured one. Again, I'd like to pay tribute to Ukraine. Ukraine asked us to join the World Economic Forum to organize this conference today. Mr. Kosher, you talked about modulating or making adjustments. Is Switzerland modulating those 10 points depending on the war? We know that those 10 points submitted by Ukraine are very, very far from what Russia wants. Absolutely. As I said in my introduction, we're also a member of 3 working groups. We will be supervising efforts on food safety. There is a meeting scheduled this afternoon, as well as humanitarian assistance. And yes, we are permanently modulating. What we said yesterday could be completely outdated tomorrow. But we keep working towards the same direction. We have the same objective in mind. The objective is to put an end to this war. Every day, every week leads to greater destruction, more victims, more suffering.
Mr. Federal Councillor, Keir Simmons from NBC News, just to pick up on what my colleague from CNBC was asking you, Steve. I was in Russia in December. There's every sign that the Russians want to talk. There's no sign that they want to compromise, which is the question you're being asked again and again. So are you saying that peace is the ultimate objective, no matter what? Because fundamentally, there's a territorial disagreement here. Or are you saying that you are trying to persuade the Ukrainians to compromise on territory, which they clearly do not want to do? And isn't the most likely outcome now an armistice, completely unsatisfactory for Europe and for the Ukrainians?
Bien sûr que vous avez raison.
Well, I think you're right. Currently, Russia is not willing to make any concessions. And the same thing applies to Ukraine. So this is a legitimate question. How can we get both parties to sit down and talk with this stalemate? It is impossible. And yet we keep insisting. As I said before, quite simply, because we have no alternative. What should we do? Sit on a chair and wait for the future of the planet to shape itself, or should we influence the shape of the planet? If we can get a collective momentum involving roughly 100 countries, some are faraway countries, not necessarily Western countries, some are absolutely not Western world countries, and yet they're very important countries. Well, I think that having those countries all together makes it more likely to find an exit to this conflict. The stakes are high, and there are many challenges. Some are more important than the others. And this is the reason why we've really focused a lot on some of the points of the 10 points of the peace formula. Without a dialogue, we will never come to a satisfactory conclusion. History shows that wars end not because you've exhausted all military options, but simply because when you reach a certain level, belligerents sit down and talk. We have to be prepared for this.
I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I'd like to ask you, we all highly appreciate in Ukraine your efforts on the negotiation process and the help of Switzerland to us. Can you tell us a few words about future in autumn a conference on humanitarian demining of Ukraine, and if it's appropriate in this situation when hostilities continue still. What do you think? Danke.
La question que vous posez était la même question.
Well, the question you're asking was the same one we had at the recovery conference in Lugano a couple of years ago.
Think about recovery during the war. Non, la question doit être répondue très clairement.
I think we have to answer the question quite clearly. I think it is appropriate. I think it is appropriate to talk about humanitarian demining now, right now. We cannot ask 35 or 40 million people to stay calm, stay quiet.
One day, we will come and help you. Ça va pas.
You cannot do this. We have to give a future. We need to give hope. And we have to encourage the Ukrainian population to imagine their future. That it is our duty and it is our interest to do this, because if they lose hope, they're no longer going to fight. If they're no longer going to fight, the geopolitical consequences will be major, and they are not in our interest. So there is a real spin behind this. So Switzerland is strongly committed, and we've really decided to focus on the demining, humanitarian demining. We've put a lot of money, a lot more than what we would normally do for such a project, because we really want to make a difference. 400 million Swiss francs. That's a lot of money. That's a major stipend made available, very much in the spirit of the Lugano conference. How can we rebuild a country if you don't demine first? You have to remove mines before you can create new farmlands, build schools, allow populations to return to their villages. And this is what we wish to do. Ukraine is a very large country. The war is not everywhere. The war, for the time being, is in some locations only. Some areas are very safe, but we need to make sure that the populations, the Ukrainian population, can live mine-free.
Aus Leute der SRF, die Schweiz bzw. Sie sind jetzt ja Co-Präsident oder Co-Organisator dieses
You are a coordinator of this NSA meeting. What does this mean? Have you opened the conference and you just listened, or do you have an influence on all of this? Well, the co-president of a conference, that means that the conference is organized by both, meaning contents and also logistics aspects and the modalities in which discussions are held. This is what we've done. And at the last conference in Malta, we were present as well. And we shall continue on this journey, just like I explained earlier. We don't quite know exactly what the details are, but we do know that the journey will continue from now on. Nsa said, Mr. Cassis, you have said we need a process where Russia and possibly also China will be present. Can Switzerland help to open up channels? The Chinese Prime Minister is going to be here. Do you also have open channels with Russia? Yes, I do see our role and our function to do this, exactly.
Thank you for having me. I'm Kodama from Kyodo News, Japan. I'd like to ask you about, you said some global, South countries, India, Brazil participated in this, meeting. So they seems to be, more neutral, than Western countries. So which kind of, opinion or statement did they express to this meeting? And also, you said China didn't join this meeting. And what do you think, why China didn't, join this framework meeting? Thank you very much.
La participation des pays.
The participation of countries from the BRICS alliance is of the utmost importance, because these are countries that have relations where a degree of trust remains between them and Russia. Russia, of course, is a part of that group, which is why the presence of these countries is important. We have Brazil, we have India, we have Saudi Arabia, South Africa also. We have also met, we also saw Ukraine's president go to Argentina to attend the inauguration of Argentina's new president. All of these are actions which are facilitating this collective movement and also to involve countries that are far away, perhaps, geographically, but that can play a role because they have influence on Russia. Of course, China can play a crucial role in all of this process, and we should find better ways to cooperate with China to make progress. This is no easy path. It will be long, but as I have said earlier, there is no other choice than to tread that path.
Yes, it's superpowers that are the mediators, and the services of Switzerland may be less required. And in the strategy, we can read to intensify the good services. What do you mean by this? Well, thank you very much for your question. Because this corresponds to the reality. The perception in the media and that are conveyed by the media is that the superpowers play an important role. For instance, the diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and then China with its weight. These high-level public services are not always good services, but they are related with the power of the country. And they are coming because we need them. We don't have this power to make these actions. And what we do is at another level, which is more important than ever, and which is a level which we cannot always provide, and this is our daily bread, to provide these good offices. Now, the question is, which are the instances in the bodies where you want to follow up these results? For instance, in the Security Council of the United Nations, you want to present the results to them? Well, to answer precisely, I think it would be too early, because we are just discussing about these questions with Ukraine to see which could be the bodies where we can continue this. Related to the process, the Security Council is not the right place. It is much too polarized at the moment, and you cannot have the dialogue which we want.
Thank you. Question in English. Victoria Valdese from Reuters. I just wanted to follow up on the point about whether territorial concessions are on the table. Could you confirm whether that's being discussed, and particularly if you're getting pressure from those countries that you just mentioned of the Global South who are so important to this peace process for some kind of concession to be made?
Non, Madame, actuellement.
No, Madam. Neither Russia nor Ukraine are prepared to any territorial concession whatsoever. That is also part of the 10 points that are on the discussion and parts of the various statements that Russia has already made. So currently, no discussions. No discussions about how, discussions about whether, but we have not reached that point.
Juste encore une de là.
Excusez-moi.
Piero Grabeck, Radio RSI. Une question peut-être un peu naïve, mais...
Perhaps a slightly naive question from RSI, but you have just illustrated that in a sense. We need to make a demonstration. We need to be creative. We are there discussing and working hard on Ukrainian proposals. Is that not the main problem? The fact that everything is based on a proposal made by President Zelensky, which of course the Russian president will never be able to agree to. So should there not be a slight modulation to that? So it's often with very naive questions that the truth lies the truth. Engaging in a discussion that is proposed by one of the parties, of course the other party cannot be involved. But these four conferences are going to allow us to reach a given point, and then we can move on to other forms of discussion. So there will be a lot of political and diplomatic fine-tuning to find a manner in which there can be an open door somewhere. And of course, the advantage of having completed the first part of the process is that we have a better vision of what is possible, what is impossible, and what will be difficult to achieve. And that has very much clarified a potential and possible dialogue that will emerge. These are preparatory steps to allow us to be ready to move on, not just more of the same. That will be the conclusion. Thank you very much, Mr. Federal Councillor. Many thanks to the WEF for the warm welcome. There will be another press conference.
07 from Mr. Yamwak. Thank you. See you later.